we have Coach DeCapito, or Coach Cap, defensive line coach at Brown University. Coach, thanks for being here, gracing me with the smart schoolness, I guess, of Brown being here.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be on here. Yeah, the Ivy League is it's a fun place to coach. It's the history of football too. It's cool seeing in there. We have game balls in our football facility from 1895. The history of football really is in the Ivy League, so it's a really great experience to be in.
Oh wow. See that you're saying things that I know that I forget about, like
Mhm.
where sports even started, like in the Ivy League and stuff like that. Uh, because we have to know the history of the game and stuff, and I always forget that, like where it started. Like, was it rowing even started some like over there?
I mean, we have, I think it's the number is 36 sports at Brown. Most of them
Wow.
obviously compete in the Ivy League conference. There's a few other sports that compete in some other conferences, mostly in the New England and the East Coast area. But it's very fun. I mean, even this year, our stadium, we're celebrating the 100th anniversary of Brown Stadium, so it's a pretty cool season approaching us with a lot of history and a lot of facts being thrown at us, and we're feel like every day I learn something new about Brown, and I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, that's awesome. So how'd you end up at Brown? Like, what kind of led you to want to coach? What stops did you take in order to get there?
So I know a lot of people say that they always wanted to be a coach. I actually originally wanted to be a strength coach. I was originally going to school for pre-physical therapy, and I was like, oh, I want to be a strength coach. And I'm blessed to be from Warren and Niles, Ohio area, just outside of Youngstown, Ohio, which is really a hotbed of football. There's a lot of coaches that have come from here, and I'm sure you know the big flex bands that everybody has.
Mhm.
So
Yep.
those were originally invented in Youngstown, Ohio. So I was blessed when I was younger to train with the guy who invented them, and I actually played Division III college football down at Emory and Henry College down in Virginia. And I
Yep.
would come home during the summer and I would train there. And eventually he started letting me travel with him to work all these camps. So I got to meet a lot of people. And during all this time, I got to make a lot of contacts at the camps. We used to work Michigan State's camp with Coach Mark D'Antonio and Ohio State's camp with Jim Tressel, Iowa and South Carolina. And I would travel with him during the summer to be he was an older gentleman, to be his demonstrator. And it was during a time that I actually had an amazing position coach in college, and he actually left to go take a GA at an FBS school, and he got replaced. And it was during that time, I kind of hit a little bit of a rough patch in my life and my career. And I remember the coaches who had such an impact on me from my high school and my college coaches. It kind of made me want to do that. I wasn't always the best behaved person in college. I wasn't, I will proudly say, my freshman, sophomore year in college, I was a list guy, and those guys got
Hmm.
me through that, and they, kind of helped guide me along the right path. And I thought, I wanted to be one of those guys. I wanted to be one of those coaches who coach to everyone, not just to, the best person and the best player, but also to help the guys that are, might be a good player, but also, struggle a little bit. And they kind of helped me grow up, and that kind of made me want to be in coaching. So after I graduated from Emory and Henry, I I had some good advice. Someone told me, they were like, if you want to coach college football, you should go be at the highest level as quick as you can. And I had made some contacts through these camps, and Pat Narduzzi, who's also from Youngstown, was one of the first people I called. And I always say he messed up. He gave me his personal cell phone number. He didn't give me a work phone. So I called him, and I thought in my mind I had this idea of how things worked. Of you graduate college, you play college football, you go be a GA, and that's how you get those. I didn't realize how competitive those jobs were to get. And he said, "Well, why don't you go volunteer somewhere, and why don't you go figure out if this is what you really want to do?" So I didn't think. Now probably asked the wrong question. I should have said, "Can I come volunteer? I'll do whatever it takes." But I wanted a GA job, so I ended up calling my high school coach back in Ohio, Tony Napolette, who was a legend, who knew so many people. And I said, "I want to coach college football." He said, "Well, let me make some calls." And he got me a volunteer job, a quality control job at Youngstown State University for Eric Wolford. So, as an Illinois fan, under the Zook
Hmm.
era. So worked with Eric Wolford was our head coach at Youngstown State. Tom Sims was our D-line coach. And I got there and I'd played offense most of my career in college. I said, oh, I'm going to be on offense. This is what I'm going to do. And they said, nope, you're on defense. I said, all right. So I ended up being there for 3 years. First as a unpaid intern, and got a little bit of money. I think me and you talked about before we went on the air, the getting started at Division I football. You're not really making much.
Hmm.
Um,
Right.
so I found a way. Being home where I was from, it was a little bit easier to find a way to make some extra money. My family was a great support for my mother and my father, but also I'd have to shout out the Buena Vista Cafe in Warren, Ohio. The owner would let me work there during the off season in the back, make some extra money, and actually help me out a little bit during the season as well too. So I made it work there, and then that first call I made to Pat Narduzzi actually circled back to it in 2015 when he left Michigan State, took the head coaching job at Pitt. He let me come up and interview for a graduate assistant job. So I stayed in touch with him. And to all those younger coaches out there, guys that are listening, it is a little bit of the squeaky wheel gets the grease. If someone's willing to
Hmm.
talk to you, take advantage of that, build that relationship. And he brought me up for an interview, and I must have done a good enough job that he offered me a graduate assistant job, and I did my graduate assistant job there. I was a D line for the first year, and then I moved back to linebackers, and then I had to figure out what I wanted to do. So I had asked a lot of people around the building. I said, if you could go back when your GA was up, if you could do it again, what would you do? Um, and one of the pieces of advice that I got was to try to GA somewhere else. Build that network that is very
Hmm.
hard to make in coaching, but broaden that network. So luckily, our director of football operations, Chris LaSala, he'd been at Pitt forever. He's still there, but he knew Todd Graham and Mike Norvell and Chris Ball when they were at Pitt. So he actually hooked me up with them. And when I found out the University of Memphis had another GA job. Now, the difference between, excuse me, graduate assistant at the Power Five level and the Group of Five level. Group of Five level, there's a much more high probability, and that was how they sold it to me. Was you're going to be the outside linebackers coach. So I was like, oh wait,
Uh-huh.
I get my own position group. Um, I get to run that. I still have to do all the GA work, and it took a little knock in pay. I was very excited. I got to go down there, got to make it to the AAC championship, be a part of that staff in 2018, go to the Birmingham Bowl. And then after that, during that period of time, I had become engaged to my now wife, who I met when I was a graduate assistant at Pittsburgh. And, talking about the pay scale when, for graduate assistants, she always says that I was a long-term investment. She got in on penny stocks. So,
That's awesome.
So that's how she likes to talk about it. And my joke was always that when we were dating, when I was a graduate assistant, that I was actually on scholarship. Um, so that was, she helped and supported me through all of that. So I couldn't thank her enough for that. Now it's fun looking back on those times. So I was in Memphis for a year, and during that time, we had become engaged. And one thing that it's hard to prepare for when you're a young coach is when staff moves on, staff leaves. Blessed to be a part of an amazing season there and work with Coach Norvell and Chris Ball and Paul Randolph and Joe Lorig and TJ Rushing was an amazing defensive staff. But at the end of the season, all of them were moving on to something else. And I knew that, and I had some opportunities with them, um, but they were further away from my then fiance, who stayed in Pittsburgh when I left because I knew the graduate assistant job at Memphis wasn't, long term. All GA jobs are temporary. So I was able to actually interview for, and I got the defensive coordinator job up at Lake Erie College up in Cleveland, Division II school, um,
Mhm.
which all of those guys were amazing part in helping it, along with some other people from Pitt who had helped me. When I got there, I was actually only there for like 4 months to talk of how fast the college football landscape could happen. I went from, making $1,000 a month in Memphis when I was there in January to then I was a defensive coordinator making good money. And then Coach Narduzzi called me up and asked me if I'd come back and be the analyst at Pitt. And hit me with an offer that I couldn't refuse at that time, especially with my fiance back in Pitt. So I ended up going back to Pittsburgh. And, it's one of those weird situations where you look around the room and you're like, I can't, this is what I've always wanted, was to be a coordinator, to be a position coach. And this is what I got. And then the right opportunity came up. Now my thing was when I went back to Pitt, so I'd worked with the defensive line, I'd worked with the linebackers. When I was at Memphis, it was outside linebackers. I got to work in a 3-4 defense. When I went back to Pitt, part of my, I wouldn't say negotiation tactics was more of, I requested, I was like, can I work with the safeties? Because I wanted to learn that back end. I wanted to, I've never worked with the defensive back. So I went back to Pitt. I could spend 4 amazing seasons there working with one of the best staffs I've ever been a part of. I got to work with the safeties. I got to work with the nickels, and it was a nice aspect of to be the linebacker, the front 7 guy in the DB's room, so I could talk through run fits and I could help out with our nickel position as we were going through there. And so finishing up from there, I got to be a part of championship staff. I got to work with draft picks. It was amazing. Same defensive staff from the day I got there to almost the day I left,
Mm-hmm.
with only one change, which is not very common in college football. You know that as well as I do. Staffs
Right.
changed very drastically, and I was very blessed to be a part of that. And the opportunity came apart at Brown. Now that would be the other thing, is I always talk to younger guys, as I say, is you don't know who can help you. You should always treat people with respect and, build relationships with them depending on the side of the ball. So Coach Mark Whipple, who was the offensive coordinator at Pitt, is a Brown alumni. He was a former head coach at Brown, and he was able to make the connection along with Jim Panagos, who's the D-line coach at Kansas, who he got let go from Rutgers. He was hanging out at Pitt for a little bit, and me and him just built a relationship, and you never know. So whether you're a young defensive coach or a young offensive coach, I would always suggest, build relationships with people on the other side of the ball. You may not spend 100 hours a week with them, but those may be the guys that someone calls to help. And luckily, I had a good relationship with Coach Whipple, because I didn't even think about it. Coach Perry, my boss now, the first person he called was Coach Whipple. And I couldn't thank him enough for the great recommendation that he gave for me. So now heading into my second season at Brown. So that, I'm, lucky that I've been in it for a pretty long period of time, but also that I've been pretty stable for the fact that I've been
Uh-huh.
able to spend multiple years at different spots.
Yeah, that's awesome, because I always ask some college coaches, because you see college coaches move all the time, right? Like they're coaching one place, a year later they're in another spot. And I always ask them, like, are you guys always looking for another job, or is it more somebody calls you? And most of the time it's somebody calls me. Like it's more of, like you said, you weren't looking, but you get a phone call of like, hey, there's this opportunity. Um, and so unless they're at the low level, if you're a GA, you're obviously looking because
Yeah.
you want to get that position. But
Mm,
they said, yeah, when you see it on TV, it's more of you're just doing your job, and all of a sudden your phone rings and it's somebody saying, hey, we have this opportunity for you. And if it's better, you take it. It's not that you're always looking.
yeah. And that's, I will say, I was looking for Brown. I was pursuing it. The analyst jobs are amazing in college football. They allow kind of that middle level, of coach, of finishing up a GA, been a position coach, a very small part, to get back to the highest level, and work within those staffs and learn so much football. But I was looking at that time. It was just the right place, the right time, and the right opportunity. And what I said, you never know who's going to help you get that next
Mhm.
step. And I always tell younger guys, it was like, either go work on the other side of the ball, or make sure, if you're a defensive guy, make sure the offensive coordinator knows who you are. Make sure a line coach, you have a good relationship with him, because you never know because everybody knows everybody in college coaching. Someone's going to find a way to, figure out who you are as a person when they're looking at you to be a part of their staff. And, I was very blessed to be a part of, you know, the whole process of getting to Brown, and I've enjoyed it. I can't tell you how much, because the analyst job, the Power 5 football is amazing, and I worked with great kids and great coaches that I get to learn from and work with. But just getting back to being a position coach and having my own room, and building that little bit of team community within a position room has been a lesson.
Yeah, and I always tell, like, I speak from a high school level, but I always tell other guys, like you said, that's a good point. Make sure you know every coach. So like I obviously know our defense coordinator. Like I don't coach defense, but I obviously know what they're doing and stuff like that. And I always ask our head coach is a defensive guy. So like today I asked him about formations, like which one's going to be more problems for defense. Like they give me that type of thing. But I always tell younger guys in high school, even try to coach on the other side of the ball. So if you're an offensive guy, go coach something on defense. If you're a defensive mind, go coach something on offense, because I think that will help open up your mind a little bit. Either way, with coaches or coaching, of what the other side's trying to do to you. Because when I started, I was an O line, D line guy. You weren't going to tell me no different. I coach O line, I coach D line. Leave me alone. I move on to a different high school. I tell the brand new head coach his first year, I go right up to him. I want to coach, and I just immediately busted through the door. I was like, I want to come coach here. And the next day he goes, okay, I'm going to bring you on. You're going to do running backs, linebackers. You're going to be the assistant DC. And I said, wait, what? He goes, yeah. And I said, well, didn't you hear me? Because I was young and stupid. I said, I'm an O-line, D-line guy. He goes, that's cool. You're going to do running backs, linebackers. Like, and he said, if you want to be an OC one day or a head coach, you have to know everything. And I went home. I'm like, damn it. I don't know how to coach running backs. I don't know how to coach linebackers, blah, 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 blah. But it was a blessing because it opened up my mind of what everything is doing, which then led to coaching safeties, coaching wide receivers. It led to becoming an offense coordinator, coaching quarterbacks, this and that. And now you try to understand every position. And now I will say I've coached O line more. That's how I get my jobs. Is oh, you're an O line coach? Yeah, come on. Like that's what gets my foot in.
Yeah.
Especially for us, because I'm from Central Illinois. I grew up. You see the Illini stuff. I grew up 20 minutes from
Right.
Champaign, Urbana. Like I went to Eastern Illinois, which was 40 minutes south. All I knew was Central Illinois football. My wife is from the suburbs of Chicago, so we moved up here in like 2018. I know nobody. They don't care. I'm from Central Illinois. They don't. But the only thing that interested them was, so what have you coached the most? I said, O line. They said, okay, you're hired. What? Okay. And now I'm an OC quarterbacks coach again, but like that's how I've. And they said, can you also do D line? But then they find another D line guy and kept me at O line. But it's like those two jobs were like, yep, you're in.
This is being at safeties too at Pitt was fun to learn, and I got to work with some great players and a great coach to work with them to be in the same room and really help develop me as a coach. But also, it was fun going back to when I interviewed at Brown, going back to my roots. D line was where I started, so it was fun circling back to it for my next opportunity when I was leaving Pitt, and it's so much fun, and the rooms are so different too. You know, being in linebacker room it's completely different than being in the DB's room, and then those are all completely different than being in the D line room.
Oh,
It's three completely different types of players and people. I do think the D line has a little bit more variety of just between the interior guys and the edge guys than most other defensive position rooms, but it's so much fun being in all those rooms. I truly enjoyed working with a very big cast of characters.
well, I know you're a defense guy. I'm an offense guy, but I
Mhm.
always say that, and I'm going to relate this to D line. I
Yep.
think lineman meeting rooms are the best because now O line I feel like it's just a hair bit different because we have our own language. I joke with them, it's really loud. Like in our high school, we have two team meeting rooms and there's just a wall.
Yeah.
Every time when I coach O line, we'd come out and the skill guys are like, man, you guys are loud over there. Like, because we're
Mhm.
just hooping and hollering or doing whatever. Now that I'm in the meeting room again with quarterbacks and wide receivers, they cannot take being called out. They're like, it's so different. Like an O line, you call them out, they just kind of poke fun at each other. D line, they poke fun. Oh my God, I can't believe you got pancaked, or I can't believe this, or whatever. Like they just, you talk about a receiver and them doing that. It's like, I can't joke with them. I can't say this because it gets taken too seriously. And it's,
Yes.
uh, they have to be the best meeting rooms of all time is
it's
linemen.
it's it's fun too because so me and our offensive line coach, we both have our own offices and our own meeting rooms attached to our offices. But what we've realized is when you try to fit 20 bigger bodies in those rooms, they gradually turn into saunas. So what we
Yes.
have what we've evolved to is that other people use our meeting rooms, and then we use the team room, and we just drop the ball down. O line meets on one side, and the D line meets on the other side, and it's fun, especially just the camaraderie between the O line and the D line too. In the college level, is we're every day we're the one position group. We're always working together. We're doing one-on-ones every single day. We're doing pods, or we're doing half line, or me and the O line coach are trying to find drills where we can service each other, but also get better at what we want to do. So it's fun in that atmosphere. To what you said too, is like the O line and D line can, have a little bit more self-deprecating humor. They can take a little bit
Oh
more
yeah.
sometimes. Because nowadays with our kids, so I watch every play, and I write notes on every single play, and half of them, and I send them to them every night, and they can watch all the film on the iPads. And high school guys now have Huddle, so it's completely changed from the times when me and you were playing high school football, when you had to go in and the VHS tapes were still there, the DVD players. They can watch it that
Yeah.
night on their iPad. And one of them was telling me, they're like, the first thing I do is I read all of your notes, and I look for the ones that'll make me laugh, and I try to think if they're me too. It's the question marks, or the see me, let's discuss,
Yeah.
something happened. They're like, I gotta watch those clips first, and then I go back and watch through the practice, which is amazing that they do that. I'm like, I'm very happy that they read all my notes, but it's also funny. It's like, I'm also looking because I know that people got, their clock cleaned, or, you know, they
Hmm.
know they got put in the ground, or they did something stupid, and they want to see that clip first, so that way they can give each other some crap too.
Yeah. I think it was 2 years ago, we would have the running backs come in with us with the O
Mhm.
line, and so that way, because it's important for them to understand the blocking scheme and everything like that. And I think for 3 clips in a row, I yelled the running back taking a false step. And then like the fourth clip, I'm just rewinding and playing it for like a minute straight. Nobody say anything. I just keep doing it. And the running backs are all like, "What's going on?" And the O line coach or the O linemen are like, "Somebody screwed up because when he does that, somebody has screwed up." Like they already knew. And so I paused it and I said, "Who could tell me what happened?" And the right tackle goes, "Running back took a false step." And so they didn't tell me that he screwed up, but they're like, because the old lineman knew like how I did things. If I just sat there, it means I was going to repeat myself, and I was just. But the running backs took it so seriously, and the old linemen are just whatever. And I'm like, you guys can't take this. Like, you don't understand. You,
Yeah.
you take it too seriously.
A lot of it, I think it also too is the different of the coaching philosophies too, and even just between O line coaches and D line coaches too sometimes, and all it takes is a little bit of change. They get used to a new meeting room, and how I work or you work, or how different coaches work and how they discuss. I'm a big, so all my notes too, and nowadays with the projectors and DV Sports software, I'm able, like, all my notes pop
Mhm.
up on the screen automatically, so they can just read the notes as we go through. And nowadays with meeting time, especially at the college level, it's up for them to watch a lot of tape, take that extra time, watch all that tape, because sometimes when we get into game prep, you're not able to watch every single clip because we have an hour meeting, then we have walkthrough,
Uh-huh.
and then we have practice. Guys, I can't get through every single clip. So let's hit the notes, and then we'll watch what we can in that meeting time. So it's up to them in a lot of ways to watch some of their own clips, and then also finding ways to take the extra time, especially with freshmen coming in, to get that retention. So my wife gets used to it. She actually came in with me a few times this year before our daughter was born. She would come in early with me on Friday. We didn't have to be until 12 on home games, so I'd come in and meet with the freshmen at like 10 a.m. All the freshmen would come in and we'll watch just their clips, just them. She would sit in on the meeting sometimes too. She did tell me I was a little mean a few times. Uh, so, are you always so mean to them? I was like, they're used to it. And then we would go out to lunch before Friday. So it's been a great experience too, but also finding those ways, even in with the meetings, to get the freshmen a little bit used to it as well, and
Right.
put them in a
Right.
little bit more, controlled situation before you, unleash them on the world, and they get put
Yeah.
in with the group.
We're not mean. We're just coaching.
Yeah.
We're correction is not criticism. So we're not
Yeah.
mean. We're just,
Yes.
oh,
Yes.
my
And
wife says
I
that too
know.
if I come home and say something.
And I know from my own experience, some of the best if you can make light of the situation a little bit sometimes too in the meeting room. You want to make it a fun environment. Doesn't mean it can't be serious, but also we're teachers. It's not just coaching.
Mhm.
You're teaching them how to react, how to deal with things. One thing I learned from a mentor of mine, he always talked with his players about it was, event plus response equals outcome, which I always stress with my guys of, especially at the defensive line, because offensive line, every double team should happen this way. Everyone's moving kind of the same way to make the play happen. Defensive line, there is a very good chance that, someone could go rogue and make a play, or someone could go rogue and really mess up. And, that risk
Mhm.
versus reward and kind of teaching them that. Um, now, I always especially preach with them is, you're one of the position groups that nobody will ever know when you mess up unless you jump off sides or unless you do something stupid. But I was like, as soon as a defensive back messes up, everybody in the stadium knows. And sometimes
Right.
it might not even be their fault.
Right.
So we got to get the little things right in our room and, build that atmosphere of you want to learn. I want the older guys to teach the younger guys. I want them to be able, if they see something that I didn't see, for them to be able to feel comfortable enough to speak about it in the room, talk with me about it, talk about it in front of everybody. And when we get outside, to be able to work with purpose, and the same thing happens there. When I yell at practice, I want them to know, all right, something that means something.
Right. Right. Um, so being at Brown, it's an Ivy League school, very high academics. I'm sure you've been asked this before. I ask all high academics, what's recruiting like? Because they have to be able to get into the school, but you also want athletes. You want to bring those guys in. So is recruiting not difficult, but just different than other places, or how does that work when you're at an Ivy League?
So it is different. The first thing that I will filter by before I watch anyone's tape is by GPA. And then we have that in our software now where you can filter by GPA. And I'll look at that first before I even watch kids' tape. Because if a kid has, below a 3.0 GPA, it's going to be very hard for them to get into school. Um,
Hmm.
so usually when I start the recruiting process, I'll go through by GPA first. Now that doesn't mean that there might not be a kid that's an old GPA from their sophomore year and they've taken the next step and they've gotten so much better and I won't watch them. But the kids I'm going to look at first are going to be the kids that have that high academic prowess, that have that GPA. And there's red flags too when I look at the Twitter bios. If you don't have your GPA posted, well, I'm going to start questioning even the GPA we have in our system. All right, what's your GPA? Send me a copy of the transcript. Let me see this, because that's one of the hardest things is when you fall in love with a kid's tape and you fall in love with the kid and then you find out that he's got a GPA. It would be hard for him to get into school. And
Right.
I can't stress that enough with all kids is like get on, if you have a kid that shows some promise like their freshman, sophomore years and they have decent grades, is stressing that high academic because it opens up so many more doors. And we recruit nationwide, which a lot of places don't get the opportunity to do, but we're blessed of we have kids all the way from Hawaii to Canada to Florida, Texas. Obviously, we do have a lot of kids from the New England region, but we have a lot of kids just
Hmm.
from Illinois. We have a lot of kids from Ohio, PA. We have kids from Texas. We recruit nationally, and a little bit of that is filtering down. There's in my area, if you were to go look just in the class of 2026, there's 8,000 kids in our system.
Wow.
We try to filter and watch as many as we possibly can. It's you are nationally recruiting, and you might be going to a school just to see one or two kids, and that's it. And then you got to hop in the car, and you might be driving 45 minutes to the next school.
Right. Wow. Yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot of work. Like, I don't think people realize that's why I like doing this talking to college coaches because I'm like, I don't
Mhm.
think you realize how much work is not seen because we just, if you're on TV, that's what we see, right? We see the production, we know the practice and stuff like that. During the season, obviously, you guys are real busy, but when it comes to that, like, I don't think people realize how many kids play football in the whole United States, and then what small percentage actually go to play on any level of college. So, like you said,
Yes.
if you have 8,000 kids in one class, maybe you're hoping to get 20 or 40. Like you're trying to like, and it's like, wow, you're only going to get 20 to 40 of the 8,000. Well, yeah, but you have to, like you said, you have to filter out GPAs. Then you got to watch film. Then you have to go talk to them. What if they're a bad person? They can have a good GPA, but what if they just don't fit what you're looking for and everything else? So it's a lot of work that I don't think us normal Joes know of in the real world.
One of the interesting things too is so I'd say the 8,000. That's just my area too. There's every other coach has a very similar spiel. So in my recruiting areas, I have Michigan, all of Ohio.
Uh,
Actually, I have Central and Western PA. And then I have Kentucky. And then I have Missouri and Kansas as well. So, and those are just the kids in my area. And as I talk, especially in some of these states too, I was like, well, I have 15 days in the spring. I said I could spend all 15 days in Michigan or Ohio or Pennsylvania
mhm,
or Missouri. I could spend all 50, and it would still be hard for me to see every kid
mhm,
that I need to see. So balancing that the time as well with the film research, and two, some of them as well as talking to the high school coaches in the area. There's certain high schools in certain areas where you're going to stop by regardless if they have a kid or not, because they might have a kid in the next class and you stop by there
mhm.
and they might tell you about someone else in the area that, maybe it's very small school that you weren't planning on going to. So you need to go see this kid too. And it's about building relationships in those areas too.
Right. Uh, that's another awesome thing is I try to do that too. Like if I don't have a kid, but I think there's a kid, I always try and I'm talking to somebody, I'll say like, "Why don't you go to this high school? Because they have some dudes." Most of the time, they're like, "We already know about that school," and it's like, "Okay, I was
Yeah.
just letting you know." Like, but
Yeah.
or another shocking thing is then you tell the coach and they go find that kid and they're like, "Where was this kid at?" And I'm like, I'm just telling you, like
It was
that's happened to me.
that and the recruiting services are amazing. They're not always 100% accurate, which is hard to be 100% accurate. It was we had a kid that came to our camp, and I didn't go to his high school because GPA was low, and he came there and he had a high GPA, and I'm happy that he came to camp and he had a tie to the area, but it was, you never know too, especially with some of these kids too. And the GPAs are a great indicator first. So I always tell kids to always have them posted on their Twitter profile or their X profile. So that way it helps verify. It's like, okay, if you're posting this, there's at least some truth. There's something there.
Right,
So now I can dig in.
right.
And
Um,
the types of kids, to what you were saying, is also as Ivy League, none of us offer athletic scholarships. So for FCS school, we do not offer athletic scholarships. Everything that we do is need based. So there's kids that are paying money now. The investment is the education. If you end up at one of the 8 Ivy League schools, you're going to get one of the best degrees in the world.
well, that's kind of what I was like. You have to recruit high GPA, but I would assume I'm not smart enough. Like I wanted to go to the U of I, and I was nowhere near smart enough. So I am a
Mhm.
dumb coach. Like I'm not smart enough for that stuff. I would imagine at Ivy League, the education, the classwork is intensified more than like what I would have done. So when you're going through practice planning and meeting time, how conscious are you coaches of like we also have to understand that their workload of school is also probably more increased than your average college.
We're very aware that our schedule operates around the academic schedule. Now, we still get everything in that we need to get in, but it's the realization of more of we have to be efficient with our time and, the almost the risk versus reward too on what you're installing, or you can't go in every single week and install a new defense or a new offense. You can install wrinkles that build off of what you've done, but you don't have, when I was at other schools, we would have the kids would be there most of the day. They could pop into class for, they might have one or two classes, but then they would be back at the facility watching film. It's hard for our guys with the academic rigor that they go through to, spend that extra time. It doesn't mean they don't, they do, but it's also me being aware of, this is what happens. This is what comes first. They are here to get their degree. And then with recruiting, it's also finding kids that truly love football because, different from other schools because not scholarship. If a kid were to come to school and use one of our spots for football or make it to the football team, be a recruited player on the football team, and they quit, we lose that spot. We don't get to
Hmm.
go. There's not transfer portal at the Ivy Leagues. You're not transferring in a bunch of kids because say you lost anyone. Now, and the flip side is there's no one transferring out either because there's an investment as well in the education and the football. But finding the kids that are high academic kids that are great football players that love football. It's you're playing Division I football, you're invested in it for 4 years. And also we don't redshirt. There is no redshirting in the Ivy League. They get 8 semesters. If injuries happen, there's obviously ways around that, but there is no you're a freshman. Hey, I'm redshirting. I got 5 for 4. So
Okay.
it's a multitude of different things that you're kind of working with in recruiting now. You've seen the uptick of it in the last few years of graduates of Ivy League transferring to other Division I schools after they're done. Most of the kids that you see in the Ivy League that go in the portal in December and in May are kids that are graduating in May and will be able to go play a 5th year somewhere else. So
So you said no transfer portal. Is that an Ivy League thing?
no, it's well to transfer into the Ivy League schools, you can't transfer from one Ivy League school to the next. I believe that is the rule. I apologize too
Okay.
if I said that wrong. Can't transfer from one Ivy League school to another. But in order to transfer into an Ivy League school to play a sport, at least football, you have to have a certain amount of eligibility left. You have to have been an Ivy League kind of qualifier out of high school, and you have to have good grades in college. So you have to, that's those that you're limiting that portal. If you go into that transfer portal and you're looking for a kid, um, well, what were his high school grades? What were his college grades? How much time does he have left? You know, that's a recruiting tool as well. You can tell these kids is, I know a lot of other schools do it, and there's nothing wrong with it. You're building teams the way that you can and the way that the recruiting world is built for you today. But I'm t- our freshmen when they come in, they're going into their sophomore year, even if they don't play as much their freshman year, however they do at the end of the spring, I'm not bringing in a senior from a bigger school who has 1 year left of eligibility to automatically be in front of you. Now it's in that part, that's a little bit of a benefit in today's recruiting landscape is we are majority recruiting high school players where
Yeah. So you're
there's
doing it like old school.
yes, yes. There's some schools that aren't recruiting any high school kids. There's some schools that
Hmm.
sign 4 or 5 high school kids in the 2025 class, and the rest were transfer portal. We're not doing that.
Yeah. So you're old school. You're like, we're going to get these high school kids, develop them. They're getting a good education. And
Correct.
like you said, if you're a sophomore and you perform better than the senior, you have an opportunity to play because you're outperforming him. You're not going to, you know, which again, nothing wrong with this because this is the college
No.
football world. If they go to the portal, get somebody cool, that's just kind of what it is. But you get an opportunity to play. We're not going to bring in somebody to replace you because it's rigorous to get in here. We're not, and it's hard to find somebody in the portal probably with that to bring them in.
Mhm. And that's the kids, I think a little bit too, is they know it a little bit better than most people as well. It sucks when you deter a kid, when a kid gets deterred because of that. And nowadays, some kids are getting 6 months of school. You get in as a freshman, you get there, and it's December, it's the end of the season, and someone might tell you, "Hey, you're not going to play here. We're not going to do that to a kid. We're gonna develop them to get the best player that we want to get out that we can get out of them. And also, it's a little bit on us too, is you really have to dig in on these kids recruiting. You want to get kids that are whether it's a developmental kid or kids that are ready to work and ready to develop, and you got to see that end goal in sight. There's still an end goal. You're not bringing in mercenaries
Right.
to come and play. Guys have been in the portal 3 or 4 times. These guys are here to get a degree. They're here. There's probably a little bit more team unity too. Um, I was blessed to be a part of a lot of great teams, and there was a lot of unity. And I think that's a big part of it. And I think you can lose that a little bit in the portal. Now, it's a great tool for a lot of kids that get the opportunity to play, but also I think there's a negative side effect to it as well.
Well, that's less pressure on you guys then, because other coaches, they have high school recruiting, they got to go into the portal, they have to do this, they have to do this. So if you can wipe that part off your plate, you're like, that's one less thing to worry about.
Yeah, yeah, and it was nice on the day the portal opened up, and there's not a line. There's not a line
Yeah,
outside a door, and you hear in some. I'm sure most of the stories you hear sometimes they get over dramatized, but there is something to a little bit of no one's threatening. There's no kid saying I'm going to go in the portal, I'm going to get this, I'm going to get that. Nope, I'm going to. They're most of the 9 times out of 10 they're bought into what it is. Now, the flip side is if our kids, if they decide they don't want to play football, they don't lose the school aspect. They can still be a student at Brown. They can still be a student at Harvard or Yale, um, which is not what you don't want. You don't want to get a kid in there and not have researched the kid or be invested in the kid and have that relationship to him to where he doesn't want to play football anymore, but he still wants to go to school. So,
right,
and
right,
that was the other aspect of the learning curve of coming into the Ivy League is that that spot is there for 4 years. That's their spot. So if they were to step away from football, you don't get to replace that kid with another, whether it's a high school kid or a transfer.
right. Because I've been doing this podcast for 4 or 5 years, and
Mhm.
when the transfer portal thing was becoming big, some stories like an O line coach I talked to, he was like, I went into spring ball, I had my O line set, the window opens up, three of them jump in, and now he's like, oh my gosh, I have freshmen, sophomores I have to plug in that aren't ready, so he has to go into the portal, try to find junior, seniors to plug in within like 4 or 5 days. He's like, I have to quickly do this. And he was like, Steve, I've never been so stressed out recruiting. He's like, I love recruiting. I love talking to kids. He goes, but that moment right there was just outrageous because going into spring ball, he's like, you would think your roster's set, you're good to go, and then they leave. And that's why I think it's crazy that there's two windows. I think it's crazy for all of that because I would assume you'd want to go into the spring knowing exactly who you have, exactly what it looks like. Uh, but that's just me.
No, I mean my depth chart at the end of spring, I plugged in the freshmen that are coming in at the end of spring. I said, all right, this is my depth chart, and that is my depth chart going into fall camp, and that'll be the way it is until someone does something to change it. It'll be because of something that happens on the field or something that happens in the meeting room, or a kid had a great summer. It won't be because someone left. And very very blessed to be in that. It's a little bit of football, and I know you'd said before, having friends, you can get burned out in college really easily,
Mhm.
and being able to coach and take that moment to build a relationship with the guys was a really enjoyable process over the last year of me coming in because I came in, so I actually started the spring at Pitt, so we had done I want to say 5 or 6 practices. And then we started the spring a little bit later at Brown. And I was in the interview process. I was in the process of all of those things. I actually interviewed on spring break at Pitt at Brown. So I didn't come back and start until their spring ball started. And so I'd done 6 or 7 practices at Pitt. And then I went in and did 12 more in the Ivy League. So I had a long spring, the first one. Um, Went from a scrimmage at Pitt on Saturday to the next Monday, or I think it was like next Tuesday or Wednesday. I was up at Brown for the first practice, and it was fun to be a part of it, just learning the defense and getting to work with the guys. And I can honestly say, so what I talked about guys that graduated, the transfers. So it was fun this year during spring ball. I got to go to Boston College, one of their spring balls, and one of my position players from last year is transferring there. So there's not a whole lot of coaches who will take a picture of their player at the new place that they transfer to and be
Yeah.
happy and be
Yeah.
happy for him because he graduated. He was a hell of a player for us. It was fun working with him. But I'm happy for him that he got the opportunity. He's going to be playing at BC this year.
I'm glad you said that because when this whole transfer portal thing started, they wouldn't say it on here, but like texting me, the coaches are frustrated, like we develop this kid and then he leaves, blah, 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 blah. But then as this thing continued to go from like, I would say COVID really like that COVID time really kind of exploded it. But then as it
Yes.
kept going, all college coaches switched their mindset. They said same thing like you said. They're like, you know what? Kid comes in, they want to leave. Yeah, I'll talk to them about staying, but if they want to go, they go. But they don't. burn that bridge. They're just like, if it's what's best for you, you feel like you're making an adult decision. If that's the decision, if it's a good decision, I hope it is. If it's a bad decision, hopefully you learn from it and we can talk about it, even if you're at that other school. And I feel like all college coaches are now into that mindset from
Yeah.
when it first started. When it first started, there was frustrations. They were like, because it was just at a drop of a hat of like, this is what's happening.
Hmm.
But it's funny you said that because some other coaches, they're like, yeah, like I know a guy who's coaching a kid. He goes to Texas A&M, and they're like, "We're so happy for you. You're at Texas A&M, and I know you're with us for 2 years. You did really good." But as coaches, they're like, "Now we just got to get another guy ready to go." Like that's kind of their mindset now. They just roll with the punches. And like you said, some coaches get really burnt out from it. Some coaches don't, and that's okay if you get burned out. But some don't. But I mean, at the end of the day, they are young adults slash kids. They got to make adult decisions, and there's no reason to be mad at them for that decision. Like you could be mad at how that
No,
decision got made. Maybe they got false information and stuff like that. But ultimately, you don't want to hate them.
no, no, because you never want to lose sight of that there was a time and place when you cared about that kid and you were ready to teach them and develop them. And maybe you did, and they have an opportunity. It's hard not to get mad at those, but some of these situations that also exist is you can't get mad at a kid who is who's also taking care of their family. A lot of these kids are.
Mhm.
And you lose sight of that too. And some of these kids are taking care of their family. They have things going on in their life the same way that we do, same way that we do as coaches. And you wish there was a little bit more structure to it sometimes, but I also think everybody's playing with the cards that they're dealt. And you can't get
Right,
mad at whether it's a coach who has to pay a buyout to leave, but they can better themselves or their family situation is the same way that you have to take about it with kids too. And if we're willing to
right,
do it as coaches, then you have to accept the fact that these kids are willing to do it as players. And you know, you can't lose that sight of I'm still here to coach football. I'm still here to win games. I'm going to go in with the players that I have. We're gonna try to win. We're gonna win games. We can't. The world cannot end because of one kid. And hopefully you never find yourself
right.
in that situation.
Which I can fix college football very quickly. One free transfer. There you go. Fix the problem.
Yeah.
Fixed it.
There's yeah, yeah, it always seems to go. It seems all right, hey, we're stable. This is it. This is the rule. Great. And then it changes again. And it's ever growing and evolving landscape of what is college football and especially at all these different levels too, because they all have different rules too. And even the Ivy League has different rules than FCS compared to other ones. Other schools at the same division of us, but different conferences.
Right. Yeah. I always joke with coaches. I'm like, I know how to fix this problem. One free transfer. Um, the window has to be beginning of summer. They see where they are in the spring, whatever, like whatever. They get a second free transfer if their head coach leaves, because that's just fair is fair. If the head coach leaves, you get a 30-day period of like, are you going to, because by then they'll have a new head coach. You'll figure it out. You
Yeah.
get to go. Um, and it's free if you want another. So let's say a kid transfers after his sophomore year. He doesn't like the new place he picked. He wants to transfer again. You got to sit. Well, you already used up 3 of your years. So, like, this kind of makes it easy. And I'm like, see, I fixed it. I fixed everything.
It's a hard pill to swallow too when you lose a kid, and I'm sure it's hard for some kids too when they leave. And the hardest thing I think will be is in the next few years is I'd really like to see how many of these kids that went in and got degrees because the number that make it to the professional level, which obviously that's the goal for almost every kid that straps up a helmet at the collegiate level. But life after football, what are you doing? Are you ready to go in life? And do you have a degree? Because no matter what you have a degree in, you know as well as I do, that degree can open up so many more doors than not having.
Right. It's funny you said that because I'm horrible. I'll find a video and my sound's off on my phone because you're just scrolling. And there was a
Mhm.
video, I'm trying to read the caption. there was some podcast, I couldn't tell who it was, and they said that. They said, how many of these college kids are actually graduating college? And they said, well, if a kid's transferring 3 times, he's not graduating college because you're leaving after 6 months and you're trying to go to a new school and this, and that. So that's funny. I think they're going to dig into that. I was like, how many kids are actually, I think that's the next step is how many of them are actually graduating. So it's funny. So I saw a video literally yesterday afternoon and I'm like, I never thought of that. Like, that's a great point of, well, like, was it that tight end? He played it for 9 years. I'm like, 9 years?
Yeah, I think it was Miami. I think he graduated from Miami, but he was
Yeah.
at Oregon. There was COVID year, but I think the COVID years are starting to dwindle. I think that most of them should be done now going into the 2025 season. I think most of the kids that had COVID years, I think that's over. Now it's just back to at least red shirt and medical red shirt now. That's what everyone thought, and then you throw in the junior college aspect of it, which is interesting. It's you know, and to what we said before is that you always have to go back. Is these are the rules. We're going to play within those rules. The rules may change, but there's nothing you can do about that. So you just have to find a way to work within the system.
Right. Um, how much name, image, and likeness do you guys deal with at your level in the Ivy League? Is it there? Is it
It's
you
there.
know?
It's there. It's there. There's no collectives, but it is
Okay.
there. It is there, and a lot of the ways too is our guys. So through and all the schools are different, and I can't speak to how the other schools do things. Um, but a lot of our kids get summer internships and summer jobs, and through Brown Football Alumni Network, we do two amazing events every year. Where I think the last one we had around 70 alumni come in, and the kids
Oh, wow.
can work on resumes. They can work on mock interviews. They can network with these guys who are looking for internships at JP Morgan, looking for internships at hospitals. Everything from, we have NFL GMs to CEOs of Fortune 500 companies that come in and they want to meet with these kids and they're invested in them and their future, and also life after football. And some of them are guys that did get the chance to play professionally, and what are they doing now? So
Sorry. You see the dogs popping his head.
no,
I apologize.
you're good. You're good. I got two running around right now, so no worries on that.
He's a
But
Bernie's mountain dog. He's tall enough to see.
I have a husky shepherd mix and a little Maltese poodle mix with my wife's dog. You can tell which one belongs to which one when you see it walking down the street.
I'm sorry. He total Joe Rogan moment. They're like, oh, hey, there's the dog.
Yeah.
He he just wants to say hi to me all the time. He's always smiling. We rescued him back in October. He's always smiling. And we're in the basement, and when he comes down here, his eyes always get wide. He's like, "Oh, this house never ends. There's a house, there's a basement, like it never ends." So yeah, sorry, you had a good moment there, and I just
Oh
ruined
no, it's
me
good.
and the dog.
But that's fine. That's kind of where so the NIL exists in the fact that our kids can go get partnerships and do brand partnerships of kind of the NIL almost in the original intention, the way it was described when it first came into existence. But
Mm-hmm.
there's no collective sense of there's people just paying people writing checks. What our kids have an opportunity
Right,
to do is to get these summer jobs, to get internships, to network with alumni that are going to be invested in them in their life after they're done playing football.
that's
So, and
awesome.
that's
That's
kind of where our NIL is. That's, if I had to describe it. Our guys are none of our kids. We can't do the mandatory summer training. They have to take classes. We can't do that because obviously they're not on
okay.
athletic scholarship. So what our guys find is jobs in the area, and they find ways to stay near Providence, and a lot of that is through jobs that they get and that they interview for, and the alumni connections are always a great tool to that.
That's awesome. So what I'm understanding is you guys do things the original old school way of like, we get the high school kids, we develop them, they get summer jobs, they get connections through alumni. That's how so everything seems like the way, like you said, how it was envisioned was, oh, this is, if a booster has a job or owns a company, they can come work and make money. Or I own a car dealership, they can do a commercial. Like, oh, okay, that's cool. That's them. They can do that. Like that type of stuff. It's not which is fine. Like the way it's going
Yeah,
now,
it
like
is what it
I'm a
is.
big
That part is what it is. I'm a big believer that these kids deserve to get paid and they deserve the money that they're
right.
getting. Um, I can't say it. Just saying like going back to the old days where the kids weren't getting paid, and you think of all the things that happened that led up to where we are. It's because it went so far, and you put these kids in situations where they weren't being able to be taken care of. And I remember when I was a tail end of me being a player to getting into the coaching was that you weren't allowed to feed them. You were allowed to give them bagels, but no cream cheese, butter only. That was like a rule at a certain point.
I remember I walked on at Eastern, and I remember a rule, and I might butcher it, but it was like, if you're in class, so like it was me as a football player, and there's like four other people. We're in a group
Mhm.
project. Hey, let's go meet at a restaurant, whatever. And you know how it is. Like, let's say you go out with people, and they're like, hey, I'll pick this one up. You pick up the next check, stuff like that. You're like, cool. Well, if somebody there picked up the check for that football player and it was found out, that's illegal on that football player. And it's like, but he was out with his classmates. They were talking about their project. They went and got some wings for lunch, and he just paid the bill. And the football player was like, hey, I'll get the next one. I remember back then that was a rule of like,
Yeah.
I'm like, what? That's stupid. That's a stupid rule. And they're like, well, now that kid has a stake in that football player. I'm like, no, he doesn't. He bought lunch. And it's a college student. It has nothing to do. It's not a booster. And I'm like, I remember this, like, that was 2009. And I'm like, this is stupid. What a stupid rule. Like, and like I said, I remember that rule too of like, oh, we can feed them, but only on Thursdays. Like, that's the only day we can feed them. And it has to be at this time, and it can only be this. Like, and this is our butt. Like, you can't spend more than this. And then they're like, oh, they get gear though. It was all dumb. It was
Yeah.
all
It's gotten so much better, and it's only going to keep changing. Um, every year, everybody grows, and I think it's gotten better. From where it was even just a couple of years ago. I think it's starting to reel back a little bit. It's becoming a little bit more,
mhm.
controllable, and I think eventually it'll settle down. But I am happy to be in the situation where I'm at right now, and that I don't. It's not a big thing on my radar. It's not something that I have to worry about of someone getting a check. Uh, our kids interview for jobs, and if they get them, they get them. They get it on their merit. They get it on their interview process, and you know, our kids, from the aid-based kids, they find jobs on campus. They find ways to be on campus to train, and it's been fun. It's been fun working with kids that are there, and then we do Zooms now too. You talk of all the things that COVID changed, being
Yep.
able to do Zoom meetings with players, and finding times to the voluntary aspect of it is you can't get mad at them if they show up. And the other aspect is a lot of our kids have jobs too, so finding
Mhm.
times and windows to work within that. It's been fun. We earlier today I did a freshman meeting, and then Thursday we'll have an entire unit meeting and D-line meeting that will break off into it. And it's funny you were talking about with the running back sitting in with the O-line meeting. Is So last week we did it where the inside linebackers came into the D line meeting. And then this
Mhm.
week we're going to change it up so that those guys get to hear other coaches too. And they get to be in the room with the other guys, even if it's just on the screen, trying to build that
Right.
community aspect, that team, the team, build that team, that, the unity between it. And it's also between the DBs and the D linemen and the linebackers and the outside linebackers, and finding ways to work that and get them around each other more when they're gone.
Right. And I let them see the whole picture of like, linebackers, this is why the D line's doing this. D line, this is why you're doing this because of this. Hey, defensive backs, the reason why you're able to play man coverage is because the D line's doing this in order to get to the quarterback and blah, blah, blah. This is how it all works together. And then they're like, oh, this is why. That's why I like offense. Like, hey, wide receivers, you complain about the O-line pass blocking. Well, look, they brought 7 guys and we've got 6. This is why this happened, blah, blah, blah. If you ran your route right, maybe the quarterback would have gotten the ball out quicker. You see how this all works. And like you said, then they get to know each other, right? If you're always with the D line, like now they know linebackers, now they know the defensive backs. And like you said, if the O-line D line are working together, now you know who the O linemen are and stuff like that. Because in high school, they probably have to play both ways. But in college, if you're split, how often are they hanging out knowing each other too? So,
Yeah.
that's that old school mentality, I think, too, of that stuff. Well, Coach, I appreciate all the time you've given me. Appreciate it. I feel like I was able to match the Brown University smartness today.
I feel like I threw out a couple big words in there to make the rest of the Ivy League proud. I know there's not a lot of a lot of guys that have made it out of Youngstown, Ohio, and the Mahoning Valley in our area to the Ivy League. So a joke is, there's always someone on every Division I staff that has some ties or, some way to be from Youngstown or work there. I'm very proud of being that, but it's also fun being one of the only ones. I think there's only 2. I think there might be 3 of us in the Ivy League. And that's now, I think 1 added this year with some Youngstown ties. So it's fun to, be from a great area and also to work in a fun conference, work for an amazing staff. Love working with my players too. I'm excited every day. We got a good batch of Illinois guys in my room, so I enjoy working with them.
Oh,
And
okay.
then so yeah, we signed one out of this class that's going to be coming in, Nolan Daly, who's from the Chicago area. And then I think I have 3. I think it's 3 or 4 that are from the Illinois. So that's national recruiting. And then I will say for anyone that's listening to the podcast, so we have an Illinois recruiter. His name is Brian Murray. You can follow him, Coach Bam93 on X. He's our Illinois recruiter. He's killing it. Came from Shepherd University. He's going to be tearing up Illinois and Midwest for the next few years.
Well, I doubt that you recruit anybody from where I'm from, town of 300 people. We're not smart enough to go. We're not smart enough.
You never know. We had a kid in this last class who's going to be the first kid in the school's history to come to the Ivy League. You never know where you'll find those kids, and sometimes those are the best places. There's a little bit of an edge too. That's what I always say. It's like a little bit of an edge about it as you find those kids that come from a place that there's not a lot of them, and they're very excited. They're very appreciative of the opportunity to be there.
Well, I will say this. I have been around one kid that's went to an Ivy League school. During COVID, I coached at Neuqua Valley High School in Naperville.
Mm-hmm.
The senior there, he ended up going to Yale. He made a big run this year in March Madness. Now he's like trying out with an NBA team. And I'm like, oh, I've never been around a kid that went to Yale or anything like that. His dad was a lawyer. He was going to follow in his footsteps.
Yeah. And he'll have success in sports and he'll have success in life afterwards and he'll be prepared for it. It's fun. It's fun being a part of that.
Well, I always remind them, don't forget about the old coach here. When I need a pool, I know who to call to get it put in.
Oh, yeah.
Well, Coach, I appreciate you.
Well, thank you very much for having me.